Hi, I'm MarzGurl.
And I'm JoshKnightTheFirst.
And welcome to episode 3 of MokkoriPlay, the only podcast dedicated solely to all things City Hunter.
On today's podcast, we're going to cover episode 3 of City Hunter titled Love Don't Leave Me, 10 Count to Tomorrow.
I do want to make note that this is super clever of them. The Love Don't Leave Me part of the episode title is specifically in Japanese, Aiyo Kianaide, which is the name of the opening theme song to City Hunters, the first season of City Hunter.
Which actually, I need to make a correction for that too, that the full title of the opening is City Hunter hyphen Love Don't Leave Me.
Aiyo Kianaide.
Kianaide, yes, thank you. So this episode is one of the first episodes that's directly adapted from a chapter in the manga.
Well, they all have been thus far. It's just that I believe they all have been thus far. It's just they kind of reordered some of it.
Right,
Episode 3, to the best of my knowledge, is chapter 1 of the manga.
Of the first City Hunter volume.
First City Hunter volume. First chapter of the manga.
Yes. And this one we're going to be following a boxing episode, so for anybody who's seen any number of Rocky movies or even just the intro to how Daredevil was created, a lot of this is going to seem really formulaic, but that's kind of what you would expect.
Well, at least the opening few shots kind of look formulaic.
Well, the plot, too.
Well, a boxer jogging down a park path in the middle of the night. He's with his, girlfriend? Fiance?
I think it's fiance, but let's just say girlfriend to be on the safe side.
His partner, she's bicycling behind him.
It's Punch-Out. It's Punch-Out.
He's running pretty fast. She's staying behind him on that bike and not falling off. So maybe she's got it on just the right gear, that it's just going at that speed and not falling over. Whatever. They're doing pretty well in the middle of the night. I just jogging in the middle of the night sounds like a great idea.
Yes, it's not dangerous at all. I kid, it's about to get very dangerous. So our guy jogging right now is Shunichi Ogino. He's a boxer who's got a title fight coming up in just a few days. During the middle of this training here, the jogging, his girlfriend happens to have her bike chain pop off. And she's like, oh, I'm no good at fixing bikes. I'm only good at fixing people. Oh, funny you should mention that.
Oh, well, it's a shame that your bike chain fell off. I'm just gonna run ahead all by myself. Bye!
Bang.
Well, damn.
And he got shot. Just right there. It's a murder. There's actually 2 murders in this episode, and we just hit the first one within the first 2 minutes.
We bookend this episode, actually, with
murders. Yeah.
With murders. And so he's lying there on the ground dying, and the girlfriend's like, oh no, oh my god, what happened? And he calls out the name of his killer, who was
Inagaki.
Inagaki. He's and she's just like, no, don't speak. Oh my god, what happened? Oh god. Let him tell you who tried to murder him before he dies.
Thankfully, he was able to get out the prevalent information as to who his assailant was, and we find out that's actually not that hard to determine later on for obvious reasons. So this ends up making the papers that Shunichi Ogino, who had a title fight coming up, is now dead. His spot now goes to, funny enough, Inagaki, the guy who he was calling out his name there in the last throes of life that he had, and this of course upsets Ryo because he had money on that fight. Now it's hella convenient that not only does Ryo have money on the fight, but the girlfriend here, whose name is Megumi Iwasaki, happens to be the person who contacts Ryo to enlist the services of City Hunter to get back at Inagaki for this murder.
Well, she contacts City Hunter. She goes to the message board, she writes XYZ on the message board. It's not even Ryo who goes to check the message board. It's Makimura who goes and walks up and he's like, oh, look, we've got a thing to do, so stop being upset about your stupid boxing. And
they go ahead and check in on it. It turns out she is I guess a doctor, a practitioner there at a hospital. She's good with kids, but she's very, very distraught for multiple reasons. One, of course, the obvious death of her lover, fiance, boyfriend, whatever.
Next of all is that Ryo shows up in her hospital and gropes her. That would make me very upset.
That would make me upset, too. And she immediately does retaliate, hits him with the chair that he's sitting on for groping her.
But this was supposed to be boxing, not wrestling.
Yes.
But she gets him with the chair.
We'll get to wrestling in a later episode.
We will. The wrestling's coming.
The other thing that we uncover is that Megumi actually is terminally ill.
It's cancer.
which is very unfortunate.
Especially in the 80s.
Very, very much so. She doesn't have long to live, so we find out that over the course of the episode, in order to pay for the services of City Hunter, she has taken out a life insurance policy.
Life insurance policy, and made it out to Ryo in the eventuality of her death.
Yeah, he's the sole benefactor of the insurance policy.
It will pay out to him.
Now, unfortunately, this goes against two things that Ryo will do. One is, actually, he does have a kind streak, and two, it will, well, let's be honest here, he wants the brownie points to get some Mokkori in later.
To get that action later, exactly.
We see here that Inagaki, our main villain for the episode, he's not very stealthy at all. Not only was Ogino able to point him out at the time of his death, but later on we see that he goes ahead and threatens the current champ, who's going to be the person he fights in this title fight, and he had a mask on and then, like, immediately took it off.
He immediately takes it off, and he makes it extremely obvious, just through the conversation, exactly who he is, why it is that he wants them to throw the match. So I guess there's money on this match. Obviously, it's a rigged match.
Right, because he's telling him you need to take a dive in the third round.
Take a dive in the third round. Hey, you wouldn't want anything to happen to your pretty little daughter, would you?
And this is the thing you see come up a lot, and like I was saying, Daredevil, where Matt Murdock's dad was told to take a dive in a title fight. Same thing happening here. You see this in a lot of boxing movies and television shows. You're always seeing somebody getting paid to take a dive. But here, the thing that I find really odd about it, kind of jumping ahead a little bit, is Inagaki doesn't seem to be a bad boxer.
No, you would think that he would have a much more fulfilling and solid career. Just boxing. Just be a good boxer. Like, you could make a career out of just being a good dude. You could make a lot of money that way. Like,
but he's like, no, I really got to make sure I get these titles, so I'm gonna murder. I mean, and it's interesting too. He threatens both Ogino. Well, he doesn't just threaten Ogino. We find out that this isn't the only time he'd gone up against Ogino, because previously he had a hit and run incident, which his girlfriend Megumi helped him rehabilitate from. But that was also an effort to try and make sure that he could sway the outcome of a fight. So this wasn't even his first offense.
No, this guy is just selfish and is totally out for complete and utter glory, and probably money on top of that. Probably more money than he would make otherwise.
Now, the interesting thing about this is that Ryo is nearby in the bushes, you know, overhearing the conversation, and this actually pushes him to go ahead and take the case. It's not very often that we see Ryo get really, really upset over the circumstances of a case, but he got real pissed off at this one. Not just that, oh, you've already killed one person and you're threatening to kill somebody else, but he seemed to be... What really set Ryo off was the threatening of the daughter.
Right. As much as he complains about children, at a certain point, like, he's got a breaking point. Like, no, we don't mistreat kids around here.
And I think some of that might tie to Ryo having a hard childhood growing up himself.
Entirely possible, though we don't know anything about what that is yet.
Entirely no, but we can kind of infer that might have some inkling of... This might be why he has a soft spot for when kids are threatened.
Sure.
Now, to the opposite end of that, besides Ryo being serious, we also have to show Ryo being a perv. So, in between scenes here in the episode, we're shown, again, Makimura's apartment, and we're starting to get our first introduction to at least the mention of Makimura's little sister.
Makimura's little sister. So, is this also the only time that we go into Makimura's apartment, which is also where his little sister lives, but we don't actually see her this episode. He says, oh, well, she just left. You must have passed her in the hallway. So you have to also assume there's every possibility Ryo did pass her, and he just thought Makimura, well, if she's related to Makimura, one, she must look like him.
Right.
And two, she probably doesn't look all that great, because he doesn't think very much of how Makimura himself looks.
But that having been said, we do see a pattern of behavior begin here in episode 3, which continues on really for the rest of the series, which is that even though they've already established that Makimura's little sister is not home, Ryo takes it upon himself to go ahead and invade her personal space and start going through her underwear drawer.
Rummages through her personal belongings in her bedroom. Crazy.
Pockets a few panties and bras. And he will continue to do this for the rest of the show.
Forever. Pretty much forever. Also, kind of gives little hints that the entire time, Ryo does have an image in his head that Kaori is feminine, even though he will constantly joke in the future that she is not.
Right, which I imagine, and we'll bring this up a lot later on, is that this is just a cover story for him to say out loud, or maybe even lie to himself, that he's not nearly as attracted to her as he internally is. Mm-hmm. But we're not going to take that long to dwell on this, because that's all going to be covered in the next episode, so let's keep focused on this one. So, the manner in which Ryo decides to go ahead and take on this mission, well, really we should call it for what it is. It's not just a mission for City Hunter, this is a hit.
There's really not a lot of these throughout the course of City Hunter. I think after a while, it gets to a point where they decide, you know what, Ryo is way too harsh, he's way too heavy a person, we need to lighten this up over time. He doesn't murder nearly as often as time goes on, but let's be real clear about this, he does a murder here.
This is a hit.
Deliberately.
A professional hit.
And I know in the first episode, right, like, he shot out this dude's car and then it ran into a big cement water fountain and then the car exploded and the guy died.
The divide.
Yeah, the cement divide, and the guy died inside. And Ryo's just like, oh well, guess that's what it is. But this is like, he's about to do a murder on purpose.
Because at least in episode 1, we can kind of justify it by, 1, the guy that he murdered was a murderer. So that's one thing. And 2, the guy had already shot at him several times. So you could kind of, like we said in episode 1 of the podcast, call that self-defense.
Now, he is about to murder a murderer.
Again, but this time, this guy has had no interaction with Ryo at all. This guy never even knew Ryo existed.
No, this guy is gonna die not even knowing death was coming.
Yeah, which to some people, especially Megumi, that might be very satisfactory. Mm-hmm. But here, it's really cold-blooded when you think about it.
It's pretty hardcore. So Ryo melts down. We only see him melt down one
Canadian coin.
Gold Canadian coin that's worth like $50.
$50 US, yeah.
Well, 50 Canadian dollars.
Or 50 Canadian dollars.
It's a Canadian coin, Josh.
Okay, gotcha.
It's the gold maple Canadian coin.
Yes. And it was a commemorative coin that they only issue twice a year from the government that we looked up. So
once a year, even.
Now, he mentions specifically that what he's melted down to create is a 50 caliber Nitro Express bullet with a hollow point, and this bullet is made of pure gold.
And I want to stress, too, like, this is a pretty big bullet, and we only watched him melt the one coin, but I gotta admit, I'm pretty sure that bullet is more than one Canadian gold coin
He
big.
might have done another one. Maybe.
2 to 3. I'm saying 2 to 3. He spent bare minimum $50 making this bullet. He could have gone up to like 150 Canadian dollars. Is what I'm saying. That's kind of a lot on one bullet.
Now, he gives some stats there in the episode that at 150 meters, the bullet would have the force of 2 tons and would be able to basically annihilate anything it hits. Now, doing a little bit of research, most of what is listed here in the episode for what happens at the end tracks. A 50 cal bullet would be incredibly damaging. You can't live through a shot from a 50 cal. And since we're figuring he's got to be about that far away, since what's going to happen here is they go to the prize fight and he positions himself in a stairwell looking out on the fight, which you imagine is only so far from the ring.
It's pretty far, though. He's farther away than everybody else in the crowd. He's up in the nosebleeds
of this
arena.
The other weird thing about it that we were going over watching the episode is that he's not using a sniper rifle. He's not using the traditional weapon you would use to shoot off a 50 cal.
He's using like a sawed-off shotgun.
Of some variety, which is weird enough in and of itself. And on top of that, he's not even looking down the sight. He's doing that. He's shooting from the hip.
He's shooting from the hip because he's coming in with a trench coat on and he's covered his gun with a newspaper. Like, yes, this will hide an entire ass shotgun.
So timing-wise, what we're looking at is during the fight, once we get to the 3rd round and Inagaki's being an ass and taunting the crowd, taunting the champ there. Hey, come on, go ahead and throw some punches at me. They're going back and forth, back and forth. Ryo's waiting for his perfect shot for what he's planning to do, which is fire off the weapon, have the 50 cal enter through the ear cavity, through his ear.
Through the ear canal, yeah.
Where the hollow point will then do what hollow points do and then disperse inside his head and then
proceed to not come out the other side of his head.
Which lines up with what a hollow point would do in terms of damage. Now, looking it up again, the fact that he's using a gold round would mean that it would maintain speed for longer. So maybe that was something he was taking into consideration. The other thing we were postulating is, well, maybe if it's gold, they're not looking for it when they're doing an autopsy because it's not metallic like lead.
Like, this guy's gonna die in the ring, and I guess they're just just
outside the ring.
You know, metaphorically speaking, he's boxing, Josh.
Well,
this is a boxer. That's what that means. He dies in this fight, and you have to assume, well, people just die during boxing sometimes. Wah, wah. They must not do a very complete autopsy then, because he's just going to be bleeding out his ear, and they're just going to be like, yeah, that happens in boxing sometimes. Whoop-de-doo.
Well, yeah, in prize fights, major boxing fight, you have to register your fists as weapons. You sign off waivers when you're going into these boxing matches that you could potentially lose your life. So, yeah, it's actually a really foolproof plan to do this. And seeing the coldness on Ryo's face, like, no, I'm going to make sure you don't sully this ring, and I'm going to make her feel better. Oh, there's the shot. Boom! And then you see this, like, X-ray Mortal Kombat shot of the bullet entering his skull, fracturing, and then
shattering inside, and then slamming against the other side of his skull.
Yes.
And just stopping.
And then he's on the floor. He's out. It's kind of a fast 10 count, but that dude is dead.
Yeah, that ref is like 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Happy New Year. He's dead. And everything's fine. And Ryo goes ahead and tears up not the contract, but the life insurance policy, telling her, look, Megumi, I know you wanted to do this to pay me, but I would rather, for the time being, you think of me as your boyfriend. Go get some treatment, get yourself better, continue to make, your child patient smile.
You know what? Maybe this is just me maybe they just meant, okay, this is just a nice one episode thing. It comes off like Ryo is kind of a decent enough dude, and he got the girl in the end, but also in the end, it makes me feel like, well, she wasn't his girlfriend for very long, because we never see her again, and she probably died from the cancer.
We don't know that.
We don't know that, so, he's like, well, you're gonna pay me for my services with your life, and by that, I mean, I'm your boyfriend now, and I'm gonna be your boyfriend until you die. That's what he said.
Well, he also said to get treatment.
Just because you got treatment for cancer in the 80s doesn't mean you didn't die from cancer.
This is also very true, unfortunately. Now, the other thing I was thinking about, and it's real stupid, but this just stuck out to me so hard, is that when he tears up the life insurance policy there in the hallway, they're indoors.
But the wind is blowing it.
I developed this headcanon real fast that Makimura was down the hall with a little portable fan. Like, Ryo told him ahead of time, hey, I'm going to tear up the life insurance policy. Can you just turn the fan on? Makimura's just like, oh, fine. Just to have that dramatic effect.
I know we're at the end of the episode now, but also just kind of thinking back near the beginning of the episode when we're first being introduced to, what's her name, lady ma'am, girlfriend? Megumi. They're looking at her through newspapers and magazines, and Makimura is looking through a copy of Shonen Jump.
Yes.
Which I thought was pretty incredible. It looked like the cover of it was like, what's it soccer manga? Tsubasa... Or what?
Captain Tsubasa.
Captain Tsubasa. It looked like Captain Tsubasa on the cover.
Or as close to Captain Tsubasa as you can get without actually referencing Captain Tsubasa.
I don't know. I think you can... I mean, if you can reference Shonen Jump... Did Captain Tsubasa get published in Shonen Jump?
If I'm not mistaken,
then
yes.
you might be able to get away with it. Because City Hunter was published in Shonen Jump.
The only other thing that I would point out is that when they're at the hospital, when Ryo is first introducing himself to Megumi, we see some nice English on the walls there. There's a sign there on the wall.
How do we pronounce this? World Healthy.
They're trying to spell healthy, but they're spelling healthy as HELTHY. They.
Heal they.
Heal they. World heal they.
Hell they. Forget.
Heal thyself.
Screw it.
Also, we see some product placement there in the crowd. There at the prize fight, there's Nikon cameras.
That's very true.
I think there was an advertisement for SoloFlex, whatever that is.
I don't know that that's a real product, but now I'm going to have to Google that later. Thanks, guys.
If it's not, I need to come up with a product and name it SoloFlex. I don't know what it does. I assume it's workout equipment. It could be anything.
It does sound like you would find it in a Don Quixote.
You could probably pick it up at a Don Quixote. But then again, what can't you pick up at a Don Quixote?
I'm sitting here legitimately thinking about... the big silence is me thinking about what can't I buy at a Don Quixote?
Don Quixotes are amazing. You kind of see them over the course of the series.
Well,
maybe once or twice.
I don't know when Don Quixote really opened in Japan. Now, we do see the entrance to Shinjuku Kabuki-cho in a couple of scenes early on, episode 1, and there at the entrance of Kabuki-cho, now, in modern days, is a Don Quixote. I don't know that was actually in the episode, though.
I'll have to keep an eye out for it. If I'm wrong, I'll correct myself later. But here we go. In this episode, we can confirm that Ryo does do killings as City Hunter, so this is really what they mean by sweeper. By sweeping up the trash, that was trash that needed to be taken out.
Yes, that having been said, though, they don't let him stay much of a hitman for very long. I feel like this is another one of these early episodes where the pacing is much slower than what it becomes later. It's a little more methodical. Ryo takes himself a lot more seriously, except for when he decides to grope somebody, then he's not so super serious. But I feel like these first few episodes, you're meant to think of Ryo as just such a hard ass, and you're like,
badass.
This is one badass motherfucker from the 80s. that is the way he's designed to be in these early episodes, and I legitimately feel like it gained success drifting away from that
and leaning more
bit.
towards comedy,
a little more comedic without necessarily losing all of that, but the pacing ends up very different. It starts happening really just over the course of the next few episodes. You see the pace slowly begin to speed up and slowly get a little more comedic. It pushes just a little bit more.
But we'll definitely see a major push toward that comedic leaning in the next episode.
Next episode features the on-screen introduction of a very important character
who we've been hyping this whole time. We'll get the official introduction of Kaori next time. So come back next time when we cover the 4th episode of City Hunter, entitled The Lady Vanishes, Boutique of the Shadows. And if you want to catch us outside this podcast, you can always find both of us over on Twitter. I'm at JoshKnightTheFirst.
And I'm at MarzGurl. Thank you all so much for listening to our 3rd episode of MokkoriPlay. And if you don't come back next episode, I'm gonna drug Josh and turn him into a mannequin.
Wait, what?